TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
Jared, hey, we're gonna need you to tone it down with the Summer Friday thing, okay?
What are you talking about?
Well, for one, it's not summer anymore.
Oh, really?
Coconut. Also, who is this?
I'm the caddy.
Oh, he's my intern.
Sorry, intern. I'm his intern.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
No golfing in the office, okay? Summer Fridays are over. You can keep the Hawaiian shirt, but the rest of this stuff, all right? Are you grilling?
Oh, yeah. Did you want a burger or a hot dog?
No, grilling in the office.
It's a good point. We should take this outside.
No, that don't. You put that right back down.
Yo, it's all in the hips.
Oh, dude, come on, we gotta go. Let's go.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and it's that time of the week for the closing bell with Ron Marmalefsky live from LA. Oh, excuse me. If it's not one thing, it's another. Now I have the hiccups. Shout out to our proud sponsor and partnerships, of course. It is none other than WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play, download the app. It is free. I promise you. Travis, Zach, myself, Amber, Holly, Jay Berry, the list is endless. We'll take great care of you. Not just for the rest of 2024, but 2025 and beyond. Viva Tequila Seltzer, CT Bets, Austin, the rest of that team and family. The East Coast is Cuckoo for Coconut, and there's a new flavor coming out in December. I will not tease you, but it's in a yellow can. And Gam Lou Finacaro says pineapple. I might lean another lemon, but we shall see. And of course, Atlanta Steaks and Seafood. Jump on over to Facebook. Introduce yourself to Terry Smith. While you're there, head on over to atlantasteaksandseafood.com. Place an order today. Use the promo code STEAKS10. Get 10% off your whole order. Place an order tonight. You could be grilling as early as Sunday or Monday. Without further ado, the one and only Mr. Ron Marmalefsky.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Not steak, had meatloaf last night. It was pretty good. So maybe steak another time.
I'm a huge meatloaf guy. I love to make meatloaf. I use barbecue sauce instead of ketchup. Was it ketchup or barbecue sauce?
I don't eat ketchup at all, so that's an easy one.
Hey, great minds think alike. Great minds think alike. 2 weekends left. It's going to play itself out. I get a chuckle, Ron, of all the hysteria that the social media and the so-called experts bring every Tuesday night after the show and their brackets and everything is revealed. Of course, we got the headliner this weekend as undefeated Indiana travels to Ohio State. 13.5-point underdogs there. Couple other marquee games as well this weekend. But before we get to them, in your rankings as well, last weekend, SEC, Tennessee, not enough offense. Georgia, between the hedges, flexed their muscles. The return of the tight ends, not Brock Bowers, but they had some great tight end play there on Saturday, Ron.
Georgia, their losses are to awfully good teams. the Alabama game and the Mississippi game. So Georgia, they just need to take care of business, and they're going to be somewhere in the final 12. We know that. Tennessee is, they're on the outside looking in, I think, right now. Everybody in the SEC and maybe Indiana and maybe Miami of Florida, they're all big Army fans this week because they want Notre Dame out of the picture. If Notre Dame's 11-1, they're in. If they're 10-2, an SEC team will probably trump them out because of that loss to Northern Illinois, and then it would be a loss to either Army or at USC. USC right now, not even with a winning record. So everybody's looking and hoping that Notre Dame stumbles once. Otherwise, somebody's going to miss the playoffs in the SEC.
Last year, I bring up the Ducks for another reason. I was on the banana and the tailpipe. Again, they lose at Washington. We were going to get them back in the Pac-12. We didn't. Well, it's a different scenario. Number one in the country, and already in the Big Ten championship. We gave out on Sports Grid. We gave out here. Wisconsin first half plus 7.5. We gave out plus 355 on the money line. They were winning at halftime. They're just not strong enough for 60 minutes against an Oregon team.
Yeah, and Oregon, you'd say, oh, they could coast into the playoffs right now. They could prepare for that game. But because they have double revenge against Washington, and they don't play this week, but because they have double revenge against Washington, they want to beat Washington badly the next week. So everything's looking good for Oregon. The winner of the Oregon and maybe Ohio State game, if Ohio State beats Indiana by any margin, it will be Oregon and Ohio State most likely into the playoffs, into the Big Ten title game. And the loser of that game will be either the 5th seed or the 6th seed and get a home field advantage in the first round of the expanded 12-team playoffs. So Oregon's sitting pretty good right now.
We go over to the Big 12, and here comes prime time. And the Sharps were finally got their due. SMU, I'm going to BYU last week. Kansas, short number, undefeated BYU. Some people compared them to a couple years ago in TCU. Finally, the slipper did not fit. They last second beat Oklahoma State. The week before, they last secondly beat Utah. Kansas, too much for them. Now Kansas hosts primetime. Short number there. What's your thoughts on Colorado, who controls their own destiny, but now coming to Kansas this weekend?
Yeah, we talked last week, and I mentioned that Colorado was my highest power-rated team in the Big 12, and they validated that. They validated that over the last month, actually. Amazingly, the defensive transformation. Remember how many sacks they allowed offensively last year. That's been cut down. They obviously have two bona fide stars, and Sanders, the quarterback, and Hunter, the all-purpose everything Heisman Trophy leader. So, yeah, they're really, really good. And I do not know what Kansas is going to do defensively to slow their attack down. Even though Colorado's one-dimensional, they get away with it because they just have a tremendous amount of talent. And it's not just Hunter. They have 2 or 3 other wide receivers that certainly are athletic enough to get into the end zone. The biggest issue for Colorado is, can they sustain their defensive games against a Kansas team that has a really good running attack? So that's going to be interesting to watch. The line, what do we have? The line is Colorado 3. I actually would have, based on my power ratings, Colorado would be shorter than that, almost pick 'em. So I think there's a lot of odds maker respect for Colorado right now. It's not a game on my radar screen unless the game goes higher, then I'm going to be forced to play Kansas. But I think the odds makers say, no, we don't want to be besieged by Colorado money anymore. We're going to keep it right here. We know it's a little high, but it's not high enough because they're going to get action on Colorado.
What's up, Wagon Sports? It says Big Tilt. Yes, Big Tilt. And it's almost like, you're spot on. They don't want to get lambasted with primetime money here, but to me, and there's a game I'm going to get to that smells. I think Kansas can, is rounding into form. Not that Colorado's not in form here, but I think for me it would be Kansas or nothing. I'm not saying Colorado doesn't win and doesn't cover, but for me it looks like a Kansas or nothing play, Ron.
I think we're one season away and one nil recruiting cycle away from Kansas fixing their defense and going 9-3. We know they have a good coach. They have a good program. They have a very consistent and strong offensive attack. Even though they had to switch offensive coordinators, they lost their offensive coordinator to a higher paid job at another school. But Kansas is for real. They're not quite there defensively. If they do win this game, that's a big statement.
SEC, we had Paul Stone on this morning. I like where his eyes are here in the SEC. Everyone knows about Texas, Alabama rounding back into form after a hiccup early. Jalen Milroe has been fantastic. Georgia in a playoff spot last week, flexed its muscles. But there's a team with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. I think Paul said around 10, 11-1. I was a preseason. I really was all in on Mr. Dart, Mr. Kiffin. I thought this was their year. Had a few hiccups. They are rounding into form. If I said of the four and where the future market is right now, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and I Venmoed you $100, Ron, and I said you had to put them on one of those four teams, who would you put it on?
Yeah, that's a real tough question because even though I have Ohio State is my top power rated team, these four teams are all dangerous in their own right. I think the most consistent of the four might be Georgia. The team that if they played their absolute best game, who would I take would be Alabama. The team I'm most scared of is Mississippi, and we've said that. I've said that the last couple of weeks. No one wants to play Mississippi if their wide receivers are at full strength. What they've done defensively in the front seven is unbelievable. I guess I'm secretly rooting for Mississippi because I think it's time to have their due. I just think their program and the way they built up the roster, the Portal King, Lane Kiffin, and so on, Dart is playing great. I guess of the four, I would pick Mississippi, but I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. I mean, Texas is the one that went to the Final Four last year and did some damage, did some damage to get there. And they're getting their quarterback back healthy. They have a good offensive and defensive attack. These are four of the best six teams in the NCAA tournament right now.
I'm going to go to another game in the SEC. I know the world is hoping and praying that the Aggies win in Auburn to face off against next week against Texas there. What a game that will be, Texas A&M and Texas. The line smells a little to me. I know Bo Jackson's not playing for the Tigers. Cam Newton is not behind center. Where do your numbers have A&M at Auburn this weekend, Ron?
Yeah, I think you hit it pretty close on. My power rating numbers would make A&M probably about a 3.5 point favorite, but we're only seeing 2.5. And I think because it's a good spot for Auburn and the odds makers know it. Every once in a while, when the odds makers have set a really good line. Great example last week was San Francisco, Seattle. The public would have said San Francisco was rounding in the form. The odds makers wanted no part of that. The odds makers were hoping for San Francisco money against Seattle. I think they're hoping for A&M money. The issue I have a lot of pluses for Auburn, and I probably will have a ticket on Auburn. I'm waiting to see if it bounces to 3. The only issue I have with Auburn is the fact that they turn the ball over a little too much for my liking. They're a -11, I believe, turnover ratio. If they can flatten that out, they have the defense. This is a good defense that Auburn has, and I don't think A&M is absolutely world beaters offensively. I think this is a 50-50, maybe even 51-49 Auburn proposition in this game, but they have to stop turning the ball over.
I have your write up on Wager Talk on the college rankings here. Again, I'm going to play a scenario out. We talked for at length here, Ron, about the two-loss SEC teams fighting for their lives, whether it's Alabama, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ole Miss, whether it's Tennessee, yet an Ohio State team that has one loss, and that was at Oregon. And we both believe on a neutral site that they would be favored there. And my question to you is, I'm looking here, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, Penn State, Notre Dame, Tennessee. That's your top 9. I know the world doesn't want to hear this. What happens if the Hoosiers shock the world in Ohio State and Columbus this week? You would then have a 2-loss Ohio State team, and the naysayers would be, who have they beaten?
Yeah. I think Ohio State, it's the name brand. It's subjective to a point in terms of you got humans making these decisions, maybe the same way that Alabama made it into the Final Four last year. Ohio State's going to the playoff, the 12-team playoff. But at that point, they would go on the road. I don't think the committee could justify that particular team could be in the top 8. And we know teams 5, 6, 7, 8 will host the first round of the playoffs. So the penalty for Ohio State would be they would have to go on the road to play that first playoff game. And I think that's fair. I still think they would be one of the 12 best teams. They're one of the 4 best in the Big Ten if they would lose that game to Indiana. And it would certainly validate Indiana's season and the tremendous job their whole coaching staff would be. So from that standpoint, Indiana would probably rise all the way up to number 2, because I don't think you could get a Miami of Florida and SMU or the other team in the mix there in the ACC, Clemson. They're not going to compete with an Indiana team that's just beat Ohio State. And the Big 12, I don't think a Colorado or any of the other teams would carry any power rating close to Indiana. So Indiana would leap to number 2, and that would be one amazing season for that program.
Russell Saylor says if Indiana wins, it's the SIG 10 from now on. Yes, got the contract extension there. We have not had that train wreck weekend. We usually get 1 or 2 of them every year, Ron, where it just shakes up the landscape. And this is the first year that it's 12 teams, not 4 teams. And so everyone has a short memory. We remember what Notre Dame did to Navy, and we saw that number escalate to 16.5, and they put up a 50 burger, and it was just lights out for the cadets. For the midshipmen. I think everyone thinks the same thing's going to happen at Yankee Stadium, yet the number's not saying that to me. Could the cadets hang around with Notre Dame this weekend, Ron?
Yeah, I think Army is a better team than Navy. They're a little bit better at quarterback, I believe. There's something about Navy that it seemed like they played a little bit above expectations, and I think Army can hang a little bit more. But that being said, I think we shouldn't underestimate Notre Dame's defense. It's been really strong. I understand the level of competition, even for Notre Dame, hasn't been where we've seen it in years past. Sometimes that's just a scheduling issue. They didn't know that the teams that they're playing were going to be a little bit down this year. So I think to some extent, Army wants to make this a low-scoring game, and Notre Dame wants to see if they can punch a few in. With Riley Leonard at quarterback, it's a dimension that Notre Dame has that may be the tipping point here. Great season for Army, regardless of what happens. It looks like they may be in that title game in the American Conference, their first year in the conference. Interestingly enough, the odds are pretty similar to what the Notre Dame Navy odds were. They were roughly hanging around 14 for a while, and same with this one. My power ratings would make this about 16.
It's kind of crazy because, when you look at what happened in Notre Dame, they beat the Aggies opening day at Texas A&M. 28-point favorites lose to Northern Illinois. And here I'm saying last week that the playoffs began for Georgia last week. They had to keep winning. Notre Dame's had to do that since that Northern Illinois game run.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And they must win out to make the 12-team playoff.
Well, we'll be talking on Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, actually 12 o'clock Eastern, excuse me, and 9 a.m. your time because of the holiday weekend. And I will lead with the world is ending if ever Indiana and Army shock the world, because that Tuesday night thing, you'll be starting it. They'll be taking your crib notes on Tuesday. How's that sound?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. If that does happen, it frees up an extra spot either for the SEC, or if Miami goes 11-1 and loses, it might free up a spot for Miami. So everybody would be happy that way. And of course, it bolts Indiana into rarefied air.
NFL Week 12, we got a divisional game tonight that we'll get into. The Browns hosting Pittsburgh Steelers 8-2. Mike Tomlin 8-2. I did not have that on my bingo card. Again, they find a way to derail Lamar Jackson last week. Thoughts on what Mike has done with this team so far at 8-2?
Pushed all the right buttons, that's for sure. Everybody loves to play for him. They don't usually do a lot in free agency, but obviously the change from Patrick Queen from Baltimore to the fact that now he's on Pittsburgh forces a fumble, a key fumble at a key part in the game. That one play flipped the standings by a game. So, going to Russell Wilson off a winning streak, having the guts to do that, and having people like myself and others question the move when we shouldn't ever question Mike Tomlin. Doing this with essentially one wide receiver. They don't have a wide receiver too. And if Mike Williams ever gets healthy, maybe he's their second best wide receiver. But there's 30 teams, pretty close to 30 teams that have better wide receiver rooms than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yet they're scoring under Russell Wilson at a very decent pace. Just another magnificent job done by Mike Tomlin. And again, it's a brutal division. You could play Pittsburgh, Baltimore in the alley. You can play them in your backyard. You can play them on my front lawn. Wherever they play, the game's going to be 18-16. And it's going to have fights, and it's going to have all kinds of fun. And that's what we saw last week. And that's how Mike Tomlin loves it.
I'm so glad you brought up earlier that Seattle-San Fran game. And I'm sitting here Sunday in the war room, 6.5, 6s. I'm reaching out to anyone that wanted to listen, Ron. I'm like, guys, I know the public's all in on the 49ers rounding into form. I know they got him on money line parlays. They got him on teasers. I could just imagine me sitting on the floor with Jimmy Vaccaro, Chris Andrews at the South Point, just listening to, give me this, give me that. I'm like, guys, I'm not telling you Seattle's going to win this game, but I am telling you this. There's something going on here, and I expect them fully to cover. Not only do they cover, that was their Super Bowl. They stopped the bleeding somehow, some way. Seattle not only covered, but won that game, Ron.
Yeah, and one of the things I've mentioned is that for new coaches, it's very important to have that bye week come at an opportune time, hopefully in the first 9 to 10 weeks of the season. Seattle had to wait, so they were very erratic. But you don't have the time day in and day out with a new staff to fully assess the roster. There were a lot of injuries. There were trades. The linebacker group was depleted. They tried to fix Geno Smith, who at times was turnover prone. Having that week to reset is just so crucial for a new staff. And it showed. They showed more consistency in the game. They barely covered, we know that, and they probably wouldn't have covered if somebody like George Kittle was healthy for that game. But they were competitive, and that's what the line told me, is that Seattle was going to be competitive, and Seattle and San Francisco could not just turn on the switch and turn it back to 2023 and say they were great.
We talked last week. Denver was about to give Kansas City its first loss, and then you look at the schedule, and they're traveling to Buffalo, and they block the field goal. They leave with a they stole a win, obviously, against Denver. They go to Buffalo, a good game. It's just not that Kansas City. It's death by 10,000 paper cuts. And at the end, they just didn't have enough offense. Buffalo is one game back, and they're lurking. Thoughts on Kansas City and obviously Buffalo moving forward?
Yeah, everybody treated it as just another Week 11 game, and it wasn't the end of the world. And I 98% believe that, but I think it was a little bit bigger game for Buffalo. Josh Allen is outplaying Pat Mahomes this year. He's making far fewer turnovers for Josh Allen and as compared to Pat Mahomes. And to me, everything was going to be in Buffalo's favor that week. But did I change my power ratings? Not even in the slightest. Buffalo had been rated a point higher than Kansas City on my power ratings before the game. And after the game, they're still a point higher. Nothing changed. And I think Kansas City, once they, they still have to acclimate Hopkins into the rotation, Juju Smith-Schuster. They're going to be a completely different team when Pacheco comes back, because Kareem Hunt is actually running the ball at a far below league average yards per carry. I know he's trying hard and everybody likes him and he's carrying the ball 15, 20 times, but he's not adding value actually to the team. They need the guy who runs angry, Pacheco, back in the lineup. So I'm not worried about Kansas City. I just think it played out the way it was supposed to play out, and Kansas City's still a strong team, and Buffalo needed that win. They're so far ahead in the division. It made sense to see how they matched up against the rest of the division. It looks like Buffalo will be at worst the number 2 seed as we sit here today.
I'm looking at your power rankings, which again, you wrote an article in college on Wager Talk and again in the NFL. Clearly, the Lions ahead at a 33.5. Then tied for second, you have Buffalo and Baltimore at 31.5. And then tied for fourth, Kansas City and Philadelphia at 30.5. And then I go to the Chargers at 29, Green Bay and Cincinnati at 28.5, with Houston and Pittsburgh at 28.5, San Francisco, Minnesota, Miami at 28. So I'll start there with Cincinnati. And I really feel for Joe Burrow at this point. The guy, they don't have a defense. And you looked at the first half and you just shook your head. You're like, this game's over. Miraculously, the defense finally gets a stop. Joe Burrow to Chase with a touchdown. The defense gets another stop. Joe Burrow to T. Higgins. Now we're cooking with Crisco here. They come all the way back. They get 2 more stops, and Joe leads Cincinnati to not 1 but 2 field goals to take the lead. McPherson misses them both, and then the defense collapsed. Dobbins with the game-winning touchdown. Thoughts on Cincinnati and their second half efforts, and of course this Charger team that is a team to be reckoned with right now?
Yeah, so my good friend, my long time friend, Ted Sobel, was in the locker room, and he got the audio, and we played the audio about an hour or so ago on the Inside Blitz show. And all the Cincinnati Bengals, in their interviews, their post-game interviews, the questions Ted asked, they were all so dejected. They know they're a good team. Joe Burrow's a star quarterback. T. Higgins in the lineup makes a difference. They just don't have enough of a pass rush to really do any damage against a Justin Herbert type. And they're just missing. They're just losing those one-score games, and it just compounds things week after week. That's why their power rating is where it is, and why there's so many. This is a league of parity, but it's not parity the way we used to know it. It's not everybody clustered at 8-8. It's this large group of good teams and this large group of bad teams. And Cincinnati is a good team that just can't get over the hump. And it's just not going to happen for them this year. While at the same time, on the flip side, the Chargers have learned how to win. Joey Bosa talked about how much trust he has in this coaching staff, how much he was low key in the interview, but how much fun he's having in the fact that he could just go out there, and the Chargers, who have long had a playoff pedigree, but have never been able to be in the playoffs, even with that pedigree, now realize that they have both worlds. They have a roster that's playoff worthy. They have a coaching staff that's playoff worthy.
I'm going to stay in the AFC for a minute. So you look as how this is slowly forming together. Now that last playoff wildcard team could be at 9-8. Call me crazy. It could be 8-9 for all we know here. But you got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Obviously, we got to add Justin Herbert and Harbaugh to that mix. And then CJ Stroud, him and the Texans were the darlings last year. You look at those quarterbacks and the coaching situations there, there's no easy out on any of those teams right now, Ron.
Yeah, well, I mean, we should enjoy the regular season for what it's worth, 7-8 more weeks. But when you mention that, I'm thinking, wow, I can't wait to see these AFC playoff matchups. They're going to be dynamic. All these guys are going to go against each other because they're all going to, other than Burrow, going to make the playoffs. So, when we get to that point, there's going to be some terrific matchups and probably some high-scoring games at that point. And I'm curious, because I know we haven't talked about it, but Bo Nix is not one of those quarterbacks, but quietly against maybe weaker competition, he's doing everything Sean Payton wants him to do. And Denver is firmly in the playoff mix right now, especially since you got the Harbaugh brothers going against each other this weekend, and one of them has to lose and one of them wins. If Denver keeps winning, throw that team into the mix. I don't think Miami has enough to get there, but if Miami starts going on this major winning streak because their offense is caught fire, we know Tua is a fine quarterback. I mean, we're looking at tremendous quarterback play in the AFC.
Yeah, and we brought up Mike Tomlin, AFC Coach of the Year, hands down right now. But Sean Payton is my second. He is not only molded that team. You have seen the emergence of Bo Nix, but what I really like what Sean Payton has done is he has brought in his guys. If you weren't one of his guys, you have been shown the door or you're sitting on the sideline.
Yeah.
Whether he's trying to get a Steam A in there now, and you look at the wide receiving core and just the blossoming of Bo Nix.
Yeah, Sean Payton's not one to mince words. If you're on his wrong side, you're gone. So you're right. I mean, he has a particular method, and it's his method. And quietly, the defense is also performing at a very high level as well. My power rating, is kind of league average for Denver right now, because a lot of it is based on their schedule, fourth place schedule, and they're going to play another team that's in dire straits in Las Vegas this week. But it doesn't matter who you're playing. If you're winning and you're in the playoffs, you're in the playoffs. And that's what some of these teams, if they want to get in the playoffs, they have to climb ahead of Denver. And that's what makes it so tough for a team like Cincinnati. Cincinnati still has to play Pittsburgh twice more, a couple of other tough teams. So Cincinnati may be a better and a higher power rated team, but they're probably not making the playoffs, and Denver looks like they could be.
I could talk to you for hours. I could talk to you about the AFC. It's just so dynamic, and it's like as the world turns every week, as we know, any given Sunday, not for long. I got to go back to the NFC before we have your closing thoughts here. It's the Lions and a cloud of dust right now, and it's kind of funny where I think the Giants on their bye week took a look at the standings, and they's like, we got 2 wins and Dallas has got 3. Let's make it like a Tankapalooza right now. We're not only going to bench Daniel Jones, he is now 4th on the depth chart. Here comes Tommy Chicken Cutlets DeVito, and Drew Lock is sitting there like, hey guys, I was your number 2 here. What the hell's going on in New York?
On Thanksgiving, the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys are going to play each other. And I think you may have to send me a couple of steaks and a couple of dark beers for me to stomach that one. That's going to be a tough one. DeVito is a a crowd pleaser. I look back at his percentages, and to be honest, at Syracuse and then the 1 year at Illinois, he had a higher pass percentage than I remembered him to have. But I think it was 180 something pass attempts last year, 37 sacks taken. Part of that is because the New York Giants are not good at protecting their quarterback, and part of that is because he tends to run around with his hair on fire. He was sacked off. I tried to add it up. I ran out of fingers, but I think it was 200 times he was sacked in college in 5 years, or pretty close to that. So that's the recipe for beating the New York Giants. Tampa's a rested team. What's going on in Dallas? What's going on in the New York Giants? The Giants are scrambling for a new quarterback. They're going to have Sanders. They're going to have Ward. They're going to have some sort of new quarterback next year. And there's two or three other teams, including Carolina. I know they have Bryce Young, who's on audition the rest of the year. But there's probably 4 teams looking at 2 or 3 quarterbacks. So it's musical chairs, and it's not necessarily a good thing if Dallas or the New York Giants win out. But for the coaching staff of the New York Giants, I think they better win out, or win at least a few more games, I should say.
I'm looking at the last 3 games on the board. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do justice, because I don't think Arizona's getting enough talk right now. They have played the lights out right now. The little engine that could with Kyler Murray. Desert Swarm trying to come back. They go to Seattle this week. Opened up a 1-point favorite. Seattle did. Now a pick 'em. A must game for both teams. Be interested to see what happens there. San Fran travels to Green Bay. Currently, Green Bay is 2.5-point favorites. Again, the 49ers in a great spot. Must-win situation there. The late night game, Philly travels to the Rams. Everyone I've talked to is surprised. The number is 3. Everyone's power rankings has this at around a 4 or a 5 to the Philly side. And then, of course, the Harbaugh Bowl on Monday night. Baltimore now 2.5-point favorites at the Chargers. Any one of those 4 games pique your interest, Ron?
Actually, they all do, because they're all fascinating matchups. I mean, you got a dogfight. Of those 4 matchups, all 4 involve. I mean, there's 8 teams. 4 of them are in the NFC West, which is a dogfight. We don't know who's going to win that division right now. San Francisco's incomplete right now. Give Kyler Murray a ton of credit, and the coaching staff, for righting the ship in Arizona a little faster than many people thought. Seattle off their bye week, maybe they're improving. And the Rams quietly, with Matthew Stafford as the elder statesman of the group, but a very, very proficient quarterback. And boy, does he use Puka and Cooper Kupp correctly. So you cannot rule any of those 4 out, which makes all those games fascinating. Green Bay wants revenge on San Francisco in a big way. Jim Harbaugh wants to beat big brother John Harbaugh in a big way. The Rams are interesting. I actually have the power rating differently than some of the people that you've mentioned, because I have Philly as a 2.5-point favorite in this game. So I have you saw Philly's power rating at 30.5. I have the Rams at 26.5. So that's a 4-point difference on neutral ground, giving them 1.5 or so. That would be 2.5 for Philly. So these are fascinating games, and you're looking at all 8 teams that tank is not in their vocabulary right now. I mean, literally, these are important games for all 8 of these teams. So it's a fascinating strategic matchups that we have to delve with and try to find an edge.
As we always slowly wrap up this show here, I give you that nice 7.5-yard tight spiral and a button hook, and we go to Ron's closing thoughts.
Okay, so we just came off these 8 teams with everything to play for. I want to pivot back to the NCAA and talk about 4 teams with a lot to play for. But you and I have both seen, you mentioned there hasn't been havoc, for example, in NCAA. Teams tense up when things are on the line, and maybe they're not used to having these big toys and these big things off the line. So let me give you 4 teams that I think might be feeling a little bit more pressure than normal and may factor into the handicapping. I'm not saying buy on them or buy against them, but don't be surprised if SMU bought their way into the ACC, but now they're major players, and rightfully so, in the ACC. Now playoff spots and top 4 bids are on the line. Does SMU tense up in this particular game against this kind of opponent? Then we go to Penn State. We know they've been a major player every single year, but there's only been a 14 playoff, and Penn State's never been one of the top 4. Now there's 12 teams, and Penn State firmly belongs there. How seriously do they take a PJ Fleck Minnesota team who's been known to pull an upset or 2 at home? Does Penn State play a little tight because they did a little bit against USC? These big names and these big games, they don't kind of match up as well. They take care of business usually against teams like Minnesota, but we're at the point of the year right now. There's a lot on the line for Penn State. What happens to them? How about Texas and Kentucky? First of all, never in my wildest dreams would I put Texas and Kentucky in the same sentence as a conference game. I can't wrap that thought out. So I'm treating this as, no, they're not playing this game. Texas and Kentucky, they don't play conference games. But the bottom line is Texas has a lot of pressure now, because I've heard some talk that Texas could lose a bid altogether if they lost to Kentucky if these things shake out, because of the strength of other SEC teams. And then we talked about A&M and Auburn. Auburn is their own worst enemy with turnovers, and they're sitting at 4-6 or something like that. They may not even make a bowl. And now the pressure is on A&M, and Mike Elko's first year. To me, regardless of what A&M does, they've accomplished an awful lot the first year, but they've got Texas on deck, and they better not get ahead of themselves. I just wanted to point out that if you're looking for havoc, there's 4 teams that might have a little bit extra pressure. And I believe at least 3 of, not all of them are on the road, but at least 2 of them are on the road facing pressure in this situation.
Well, I have to ask you this final question. You want pressure? I'm going to give you pressure, because does Nebraska Cornhuskers, 2.5-point favorites against Wisconsin, do we get a win and a bowl bid on Saturday?
What's the best way, the strategic way, the tiptoe on icebergs way to answer this question? If Nebraska wins, they're bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. If Nebraska loses to a team that just fired their offensive coordinator and just came off that close loss and whatever, you might see me on the street asking for a handout at the gas station or something like that. I'm taking the deepest of deep breaths in a game I didn't think I'd be mentioning on your show, a team that couldn't kick a field goal or make a special teams play to save their life for 8 years. And I'm saying that Nebraska should roll in this game. And I'd be very disappointed if Nebraska doesn't take care of business once and for all and get to 6 wins. And I might be, and then on Tuesday, I might be coming on your show and saying, I'm sorry, Jeff. I said I like Nebraska, but that's where I'm at.
We'll start the GoFundMe for both of us because, such a promising start to a year, 5-1, could have been 6-0. Had opportunities, showed some flashes. Of course, they got rolled by Indiana, but they bounced back. Had an opportunity to win in Columbus, and then these last couple of weeks, right there knocking on the door. I didn't like the spot against USC. The quarterback, I hate to say it, they spent the millions to get this quarterback. He's really regressed of late, Ron.
Yeah, and I'm not sure Nebraska knows Nebraska hasn't had that kind of system where they're doing anything but plowing you down versus the run. So quarterback teaching is a new art in Nebraska, even with my rule coming from the NFL. he was not that style of coach anyway in the NFL. So it's a whole new breed of business there. But get ready for a lot of teams to invest a lot of money on these guys and then regret it because they're throwing money. It's in the new era. They think they have the next best thing. A lot of these people are just not going to meet these maybe way too high, lofty expectations that they're given when they're going to the school and they're suddenly going to become the savior. It's a new era that we're in with the new and the money being thrown around and a transfer portal. Sometimes the best thing you could do is stay where you are.
Well, Saturday morning, I will be at the Heights at early while most people are sleeping, getting set up for BC UNC, another team trying to punch their ticket to a bowl game. Be interesting to see if Mr. O'Brien, Coach O'Brien, has that scowl walking by us at around 9:30 as he did against Louisville. He wasn't too happy. I hope they find a way to punch their ticket as well there. Scroll has been going the whole time, Ron. Everyone knows on X to find you at Ron A Sports. But as we always wrap up here, where can they find your written work as well?
Had a couple of articles focusing on power ratings because I get a lot of power rating questions. And I think on one of the shows we did a month ago, we talked a little primer on power ratings. Paul Stone did an excellent job with his much more detailed primer, power rating treatise as it was as to how you develop and you change power ratings. So that was just a snapshot in time, but Wager Talk is where you'll find that. And then if you follow me on X Twitter, you'll see what shows I have and what other stuff is going on. Everybody have a great weekend. And it looks like we'll be back on Tuesday, but we'll give it an early Thanksgiving shout out to everybody anyway. Enjoy your turkey. Don't overeat. Or maybe do overeat because it's a lot of fun to eat a lot of turkey on Thanksgiving.
As Ron said, we look to and hope to be here on Tuesday at noon, my time, 9 a.m. his time. We're going to squeeze a show in because Thursday at this time will be Thanksgiving, and everyone at 5:52 will be at halftime of the Giants-Dallas game wondering why am I watching this and looking for more dessert as they get ready for the 8 o'clock game, Green Bay, or 8:20 Green Bay in Miami. So from myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Investor, one and only Ron Marmalefsky at Ron A Sports. A shout out to Mr. Russell Saylor, Jay Berry, Wagon Sports, everyone watching the show. We can't do it without you guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy your night, and we will see you soon.